The coroner's report into the 2016 tragedy at the Dreamworld theme park, where 4 members of the public died when the Thunder River Rapids ride broke down, was issued in February 2020 and highlighted major shortcomings in Ardent Leisure's leadership, pointing to a systemic failure in all aspects of safety, rudimentary and deficient safety management practices prior to the tragedy, and a negligent, greedy corporate culture that put profits before safety. The coroner stated that such a culpable culture can exist only when leadership from the board down are careless in respect of safety. Now, this is a pretty damning opinion of the former board of directors, who included executives and non-executive directors with extensive business and board experience. However, it's likely an opinion shared amongst the victims' families and members of the public, if we look solely at the findings in the coroner's report. What's troubling, though, is that the coroner's opinion appears to be significantly different to the perception of the culture and safety governance by the former chair of Ardent Leisure, owner and operator of the theme park, when he was quoted saying after the incident, "I still can't work out how it could have happened. Ardent had a very strong culture of safety. It had a safety committee, which included directors and various executives involved with safety issues at the operating levels. The committee met regularly and reported very frequently to the board." So why the gap? How is it that a chair, and one might infer the entire Ardent Leisure Board, had such a different perception of what a strong culture of safety looks like to that of the coroner, and more than likely to many in the corporate and safety professional communities? Even the safety manager at Dreamworld described the safety systems in place at the time of his employment, approximately 7 months prior to the event, as quite immature. And how is it that a chair can have such confidence in the board's governance, but be seen by others as careless or negligent? You're watching part 1 of a 2-part series where we take the tragic event at Dreamworld and the coroner's findings, and we dive a bit deeper into what this means for boards and their understanding of safety. In part 1, I'll explore the difference between carelessness and a lack of competency, because these 2 aspects are important in understanding why those on the Ardent Leisure Board were so comfortable in the management of safety at Dreamworld, where others in hindsight have said the board was careless and negligent. In part 2, I'll look at some foundational principles that I believe should be included in any corporate director's professional development in safety governance and leadership. If you're new here, I'm Samantha McGolrick, and I welcome you to our little corner of the internet, where I help purpose-driven members make a positive impact on the health, happiness, and resilience of society, and ultimately bring more meaning and purpose to their board role through their effective leadership and governance of safety, health, and well-being. Unfortunately, the coroner gave very little insight into the role that the Ardent Leisure Board may have played in contributing to this tragic event, or the competency of board members in safety governance, and more broadly, their understanding of their influence on adverse outcomes, as well as creating safety. So the real question we want to understand is whether the board was actually careless, as the coroner suggests, or did they in fact lack competency in safety to be effective in their governance and leadership? To answer this question, we will apply a similar line of thinking that we should use when looking at any accident, where we're trying to understand why something happened, why events played out as they did. This means we refrain from asking, why did someone do the wrong thing? And instead we seek to understand, why did what they do make sense? So we're not asking why the board was careless. We're asking, why did the structures and systems in place make sense to them, or bring them comfort that things were in a good place or operating as they should? When we ask the question in this way, we are much more open to understanding powerful contextual features in the system that create and influence safety. When we ask the question in this way, we avoid blaming individuals or finding someone accountable, which quite frankly is much easier to do than really trying to understand how safety is created or hindered in complex systems. But this is where many leaders get caught out. They go down and into the system looking for broken parts or people who don't follow the rules, instead of looking up and out to understand all the relationships and the interactions at play that influence why we do what we do, and perhaps where leaders influence why people do what they do. So as difficult as it might be to not look at the tragic event as a failure of leadership and avoid seeing the board as negligent or careless, we need to first ask ourselves, why did the governance and culture of safety look so good or robust to the Ardent Leisure Board? Why did they see what was outlined in the chair's comments? Why did that make sense to them and bring them comfort? Because when an incident occurs, it's important to understand that the events or the decisions that led to the event were likely not unique. Indeed, it's very likely that how the work was done that day or that decision or the decision that was made months ago was likely part of everyday work. And that's hard for many leaders to see because they want to find something broken so they can fix it. And it's a natural human instinct to want to do that. Many leaders are compelled to do so. But I encourage you, instead of seeing broken parts and thinking linearly, like event A causes event B, which causes event C, and so on, appreciate that things are not that simple in complex systems. We need to think more in loops and understand that the system's behavior will emerge from the web of relationships that exist and the structure of the feedback loops. For example, in complex systems, every day comes with new inputs and decisions that need to be made, and to manage the ever-present variability, people will make trade-offs. But people can't see or appreciate how each of their decisions or how the impact from their decision will influence other parts of the system, like other departments or even externally, who also need to make decisions. All of these decisions are like feedback loops that have ripple effects, and they inform other people's decisions. Now, this is how your decisions in the boardroom can have a lot of influence on how those in your executive team or line managers or those on the front line make decisions. Because depending on whether the feedback loop is reinforcing or balancing, the decisions you make can be exacerbated and create the behavior you want or that of which you don't want. So if we appreciate that trade-offs are inevitable in complex systems, and they're not a bad thing, they're not something we should avoid, they help us achieve success, but can also be a source of failure. But each trade-off will not necessarily produce the same results as it did the day before or the month before. But quite often, people will rely on past success to predict future success. So when there are no accidents or adverse outcomes from people's decisions, they think that those trade-offs were justified or that they're not hindering safety, so they assume that they can make those decisions or trade-offs again with the same outcome. But in complex systems, past success is not a predictor of future success. And all of those trade-offs will inform patterns of behavior or the culture. So consider for a sec that the coroner referred to the corporate culture at Dreamworld as negligent and greedy, where profits were put before safety. But if the Ardent Leisure Board was relying on past success from their budgeting or other resourcing decisions as a predictor of future success, then because they're not seeing any significant incidents, maybe no incidents at all, this will affect the board's perception of the success of their previous decisions. And to that, performance reporting that shows no significant incidents, indeed, the company is performing well amongst resource constraints, this then becomes a reinforcing feedback loop, which in systems thinking is not necessarily a good thing. In reinforcing loops, an abundance of one element can continually refine itself, which often leads to it taking over. Basically, this reinforcing feedback loop confirms the board's biases or their expectations that safety is being managed well and that their decisions are not having a negative impact. This is why it's so important that we continue to learn and update our mental models of safety and systems thinking, because this ensures that we have a better understanding of the influence of our decisions and the complexity involved in creating safety in complex systems. In the boardroom, the mental models of board members will influence what they pay attention to, comment on, measure, reward, and monitor, or vice versa. What you don't do in any of these areas will influence patterns of behavior as well. Now, this is a critical issue because this is how the board influences organizational culture. You can see here in the systems mapping iceberg diagram that the mental models of the board will inform the structure of the system, and the structure influences patterns of behavior, aka organizational culture. And culture will influence people's decision-making, which will influence whether we hinder or create safety. So if board members are going to be able to influence the right patterns of behavior and to do their best to ensure that the structure of the system is one that prioritizes safety where there's a conflict with such things as profit and efficiency, then board members must have an informed mental model of safety. That means a solid foundation of knowledge in safety and appreciate the breadth of their influence on safety outcomes from their decisions and behavior in the boardroom. And this is where we're getting to the crux of whether the Ardent Leisure Board was actually careless or lacked competency and safety. And if it was a lack of competency, was it unique to that particular board? Because if not, how widespread is this amongst the corporate director community? The former chair of Ardent Leisure outlined a number of governance structures and artifacts that were clearly part of his mental model of safety and informed what he believed was a robust safety governance framework. And likely the information that was being reported to the board confirmed what they believed was a strong safety culture. Again, based on their mental model of safety. Yet the coroner still referred to the board as careless. We can all appreciate that you can have all the structures and systems that the former chair outlined, but if you have the wrong mental models or they're out of date, then it's like filling up a bucket with a hole in it. It doesn't matter the number of committees you have or who sits on them and how frequently they meet. If the mental models of those committee members are out of date, then they will be ill-informed, which won't help board members influence a safe and resilient organization, and in many ways, it will hinder their efforts of those in the business to create safety, which I believe is most likely the scenario with the Ardent Leisure Board. The coroner's report into the Dreamworld tragedy is a missed opportunity to understand the Ardent Leisure Board mental models of safety and perhaps highlight what I see as a growing gap in the mental models of safety that many experienced NEDs and executive directors have. And this gap is only going to get wider as the safety profession becomes more informed and knowledgeable in terms of what safety is and isn't and how to create it. And importantly, the role of leadership in building resilient organizations. But that's what we're going to cover in part 2. As always, I hope this has helped you in your quest to know what to ask and when to act. I encourage you to be brave and stay true to your commitment to lead from the heart, and I'm confident that you will reap the rewards. I'll catch you in part 2.